in 2018, featuring guest speaker CISSP cybersecurity expert Derek A. Smith. You're also joined by BeyondTrust product manager Jason Silva, who will run us through a brief overview of BeyondTrust PowerBroker for Windows after Derek's presentation, so please stick around for that. My name is Sarah, your webinar host today. A reminder to please submit your questions via the GoToMeeting console anytime throughout the webinar, and we will cover your questions at the end during our Q&A time. Also, today's session is being recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up email containing links to the recording and the slides shown here today within about 1 to 2 business days from now. And the slides can also be immediately downloaded via the handout section in the GoToWebinar console. You should find that on the side of your screen. Additionally, we now offer CPE credits through ISACA. If you are attending this for CPE credits and have an ISACA account, you must download the attendance verification document in the handout section now in order to submit proof that you attended today's session. So this document will not be available post-webinar, so please download it now if you plan to submit your credits to ISACA. And note that as an individual, you are responsible for reporting your CPE credits and hours earned to the organization ISACA. So at this point, let's hand it on over to Derek Smith, who will jump right in. Hello, Derek. The line's all yours. Please
Hello.
take it. Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And everybody, thank you all. I'm very excited to be here. I love doing these with Beyond Trust, and I love even more that you take time out of your valuable day to be here with us while we do this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Today I'm going to talk about the top 10 best practices for managing your Windows privileged accounts. And before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am as we get started, and then we can jump right into it because I have a lot of valuable information I want to share with you today. So first of all, again, I'm Derek Smith. I'm founder of what's called the National Cybersecurity Education Center, and you can get that at nceconline.com. I talk about other cybersecurity things and share information with folks there. I'm a board advisor on several boards. Very important to me. For about 27 years, I've been a college professor. I'm a associate professor at the University of Maryland, University College, Virginia University of Science and Technology, and I teach certification courses at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I've authored several books that you can see there. CyberSense, the Leader's Guide to Protecting Critical Infrastructure is one of my favorite, and I have a companion guide that goes with that as an action plan. I work for the IRS. I'm a government IT program manager, and I own a small little training company for doing my cybersecurity training called Catella Cybersecurity Solutions. I love this, folks. I live for this. I spent 18 years as a federal agent, so that kind of got me started in the security field, security background. I've been in the security field for about 37 years. So I love sharing information about this. I love studying, I love researching, and I love teaching it. And today I want to share some of that information with you all. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, when it comes to your privileged account credentials, what you don't know can definitely hurt you. Okay, what we don't understand about our privileged accounts can definitely hurt us. And I know you all understand a lot about it and know what they are, but I'm going to get into that as we go on. Also, because our privileged account passwords are our favorite target for attackers or for hackers, once accessed, they're going to give the folks, as we always say, and I know it's a cliche in our industry, the keys to the kingdom. All right. And often the bad part is that you don't even know they're in your system. You don't even know they're there for weeks or months to come. So they could be in there wreaking havoc on your enterprise, on your servers, and you don't even know what's happening. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about that and give you some pointers, 10 pointers to be exact, on what you can do about all of it. So what's my goal? I'm going to talk to you about what privileged accounts are as they're specific to Windows. I'm going to give you some reasons why you should protect them in the first place. Mainly, I'm going to talk about the top 10 best practices that you can use right now, today, in 2018. So first of all, why do we need security? Well, I think it's pretty common sense. Your privileged account management is going to be critical to your data security and protecting that data. The thing is that the bad guys want to get their hands on the good stuff, and credentials, especially privileged credentials, is going to give them that access that they're looking for. So in the wrong hands, those privileged accounts represent the biggest threat to your enterprises right now, because these accounts can breach your personal data. People who have them can use them to complete unauthorized transactions. They can cause denial of service attacks and hide activity by deleting audit data. They can get in, and once they have the privileged accounts, they really become an inside threat. And they can go erase some of those logs. And if they do it the right way, you might not even know they're ever there. Those privileged accounts, like your Windows Administrator accounts or other accounts you have associated with your database ownership and your router access and things like that, are required for your platform to function. So we can't get away from them. We have to utilize these accounts. They have to be there. Also, control of privileged accounts is at the top of your auditor's list. When you have to do your yearly audits, and most of us do, these accounts are going to be an essential component of your compliance mandates for things like Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, FERC, HIPAA, and other audits like those. And even more so than that, now your business partners are asking for a review of your controls associated with privileged accounts as part of their auditing requirements. So again, we can't get away from this. It's very important that we control them, we track them, and we know what's happening within these different accounts. Speaking of those accounts, let's talk about the 7 types of privileged accounts that you have with Windows. And number one, I want to talk about your local administrative account. And those are those non-personal accounts which provide you administrative access to your local hosts or your local instances that you have. So those local admin accounts are routinely used by our IT staff, and they're using to perform their maintenance on workstations and the servers and the network devices and databases and mainframes and all the other stuff you have in your organization. And often what happens is that they have the same password across your entire platform or your entire organization. And we do this because it makes it easier for us to use. But here's the problem. That shared password across those thousands of hosts makes for a soft target that advanced threats routinely want to try to exploit. The second type is the privileged user accounts. Now, those are the name credentials which have been granted administrative privileges on one or more of your systems. And this is typically one of our most common forms of privileged accounts that we have, or where we grant access on our enterprise network. And what they do is they allow our users to have administrative rights on, for example, their local desktops or across the systems that they have the responsibility of managing. And often these accounts have unique and complex passwords. So what do we do usually with unique and complex passwords? Sometimes we write them down so we can remember them, or have a list of them, whatever it may be. But the power that these wield across those managed systems that we have make it necessary for us to continually monitor the use of them and also control those passwords. The third one you see there is domain administrative accounts. Now, they have privileged administrative access across all your workstations and your servers within your domain. So while these accounts may be few in number, what happens is that they provide the most extensive and the most robust access across your network. If somebody gets complete control over this, complete control over all the domain controllers and the ability to modify the membership of every administrative account you have within your system, that compromise of those credentials is often going to be the worst case scenario that we can have in our organization. The next one is the emergency accounts. So we use those unprivileged, we take unprivileged users and we give these administrative rights or access so they can secure our systems in case there's an emergency. We sometimes call these break glass. And if you're interested, I did a webinar for Beyond Trust a while back on break glass. You can go learn all about that by watching that webinar. But anyway, while access to these accounts typically require us to have managerial approval for security reasons, what happens is that it's usually a manual process and it's usually inefficient and it lacks any type of auditability. Again, remember I told you we look at auditing and how important that is. The next one is service accounts. So these can be privileged local or domain accounts that are used by an application or some type of service to interact with our operating system. So what happens here is that in some cases, those service accounts have domain administrative privileges depending on what the requirements are for the application that I'm using them for. So local service accounts can interact with a variety of my different Windows components, and that's going to make coordinating password changes for those accounts pretty difficult. Only 2 more. Active Directory. You all heard of Active Directory or our domain service accounts. And password changes can be even more challenging with these because they require coordination across multiple systems. So this challenge often leads to us having a common practice of rarely changing those service account passwords. And that's going to represent a significant risk across our entire enterprise. And the last one is our application accounts. And those are accounts used by our applications to access our databases, run batch jobs or scripts, or provide access to other applications that we're working with. And these privileged accounts are usually going to have broad access to some of the underlying company information we might have that's residing in those applications and those databases. So when we take those passwords for these accounts, sometimes we embed those and store those in unencrypted text files. And that's a vulnerability that can be replicated across all our servers, to provide greater fault tolerance for the applications that we have. Now, this vulnerability, though, is going to represent a significant risk to us because the applications often are going to host the exact data that the APTs are looking for. When I say APTs, I'm talking about advanced persistent threat. I'm talking about hackers and folks like that. This is what they're looking for. This is what they want to get their hand on. And we open up to that when we have these different types of application accounts with those unencrypted text files that I spoke of. So what's the problem with the Windows accounts? Okay. So just a few minutes ago, I alluded to the issue of attackers targeting our credentials. That's what they want. That's the keys that's going to open the gates to our organization's data processes and data assets more so. So a lot of people in the security industry like us, what we tend to do is we tend to focus on authentication strength and user directories. I still say access is the most important thing. So if we keep them from getting access in the first place, we try, that's going to solve a lot of our problems. And that's the authentication strength. But in a lot of larger organizations, there are 3 or 4 times as many privileged accounts as there are users. That's a lot of accounts, especially if you have a lot of users. So that privileged account is how administrators are going to log onto servers. That's how they're going to get to the switches, the firewalls, the routers, the database servers, all those things. And in the worst case, using default passwords are going to be there. They're never going to be revoked. They're often the username. I know you guys say I don't do this, but usually the username is admin, or it might even be a blank password that you can easily get into. Now, what organizations have done over the years is that they've learned to disable the default passwords. Don't we all say that every day to everybody? Hey, make sure you take down those default passwords, and change your password. But often that default is replaced with a single login, and that's shared by anybody who needs to get on that machine, especially if it's our Windows server and we have different system administrators. So others and other companies, what they've done, they've graduated to separate credentials for each administrator. But then you know what they do? Then they don't manage them. They don't go back and look at it. They don't audit it. So when an employee or a contractor leaves, their credentials are never erased. They're still sitting out there. And then another issue we have is with machines that have to talk to each other, and that code, the password code is hardwired with usernames and passwords that are hard to change. Again, we have a problem, especially when we start hardwiring our passwords into machines. And one of the worst examples I've seen is that Microsoft still allows an attacker who has admin rights on one machine to log into any other machine on the network just using those store hashes of credentials. And that can end up being a nightmare. Okay. By the way, Beyond Trust is one of a handful of solutions out there that address these type of issues that I just brought up of privileged account security. And we're going to demonstrate some of that to you in just a little while. But here's the thing. Centrally managing your privileged accounts should be deployed at every organization with extensive infrastructure. You cannot do this one-off. You cannot do this manual thing. I'm going to talk about that later. You have to centralize that and control it in some type of way. We'll get to that. What's the problem with accounts also? Privileged access management for Windows is difficult with the native capabilities that come into it. Things like Active Directory, authentication policies, credential guards, multi-factor authentication, and things like that. Now, this list here is not exhaustive. There's other things out there also. But the tools that I list here help you enforce a lot of the best practices I'm going to talk about a little later. However, again, manually managing those identities and access for multiple Windows systems is very difficult and also very inefficient because each system is unconnected and it kind of operate in a vacuum, and it's going to take a lot of work to maintain that type of system. So let's talk a little bit about privilege. What is privilege? How is it defined? I think everybody knows it, but I want to give you my take on it. And basically, it's the authority to make administrative changes to a network or to a computer. So both people and accounts have privileges, right? Because people can do it, accounts can do it. And both can have different levels of privileges. We know that. For example, your senior IT person or administrator might be able to configure servers, do firewalls, configure cloud storage. So they have a high level of network privilege. But your sales team, let's say if you have one, shouldn't have any privilege. They should be able to use the systems. They should be able to log into their laptops and assess their access their sales data, let's say, but they should not be able to change network settings or change permissions or download software and things like that to the system. And hopefully all of you already deploy something like that. So although your senior IT administrator has been given a certain level of privilege, he still needs a privileged account in order to be able to perform his or her privileged network tasks. And taking it even further, I'm talking about privileged now, where privilege is a noun that I just described for you that refers to the concept of having an increased level of access and permissions on that network. Actually, using the word privileged is an adjective. And what that does is describe things with privilege, like our privileged account or a privileged user or a privileged identity or something like that. So when somebody tells you that an account has privilege, what they mean is that it has a higher level of access than a standard user account. And you all know this already. So you're going to hear words like privilege or privileged used in context with management. And privilege management, what that refers to is the process of managing who or what has privileges on your network. And this is entirely different from just privileged account management, which refers to the task of managing the actual accounts that's already been given privileges. So I just want to kind of give an overview of what I'd say privileged and privileged accounts actually represent. Now, the next thing is who's a Windows super user? I mean, we talk about Unix and Linux and things like that. We kind of know that there's a super user account and things like that. But where is it and what is it in a Windows account? So if you're the only user on your Windows machine, then you're the administrator of that machine, okay, that particular machine, especially if it's a home machine. But with the Windows operating system, there are so many little things that's hidden away, and that super administrator account is one of those things that's hidden away. Most of you guys and ladies probably don't even know about that. So if you're wondering, that super administrator account is different from your current regular administrator account. And it gives you a lot more permissions to change things in your operating system. Now, of course, Windows doesn't call this a super account, but it definitely gives you some extra privileges over the normal administrator account that you might have access to and that you might be used to. So indeed, just like Unix and Linux, we do have the ability to be a super user. And I think folks who control direct Access Directory, you can consider those folks super users as well. So I want to talk about the concept least privilege. If you all security on this call, you definitely know what least privilege is. But basically, I want to preface it this way. When you have an account, a privileged account, if those mismanaged privileges, if they're mismanaged, basically, as it says here, they pose a devastating risk to your organization. And you know that. You can lose money, reputation, things like that. To reduce the risk around shared and privileged accounts, there first and foremost need to be some type of accountability. We need to hold people accountable for their actions on our systems. And we do this by restricting access. Restricting access to mission critical servers do not mean that the system administrator is going to be diminished in their duties. They won't be able to perform their duties. It just means that now we're getting that accountability I said that we need. And that's the whole purpose of it. You only need so much to do your job. And to be honest with you, if I'm the sysadmin, I really don't want access to everything because I don't want to make a mistake. And I don't want to be held accountable for it later. So this is what that least privilege is all about. Now, let's look at some security tactics and solutions that's going to address some of these privileged access management problems that I talked about. So when you're securing the Windows, basically the lack of accountability that I spoke about and protection of privileged accounts in your corporate or organizational government networks is the vulnerability that's going to be most often exploited by advanced persistent threat, by insider threats, and things like that. And the benefits we have from securing these privileged accounts can't be underestimated, right? We all know this is very important and it's something that we need to do. So regardless of the sources available, there are practical solutions that we can put into our budget to try to do that. And I'm going to talk about two of these here. The main thing is that we can have manual protection, right? Or we can have some type of automated privilege account protection or security solutions that's going to do that for us. When I talk about manual protection, you see it up here on the screen. But while it's better than doing nothing, manually protecting, managing, and monitoring those privileged accounts can be very, very tedious. I already mentioned that. It can be time consuming It could be a drain on your resources, and it can be very, very inefficient. So what large and we look at large organizations, a small organization, if you're a small law firm or doctor's office, maybe you can handle it. But if you're a large organization, you're going to find it almost impossible for you to manually audit the thousands of privileged accounts that you probably have on a daily basis. And also with the management solutions, it's going to be minimally effective if you have any size due to the limitations you have on scaling and auditing and reporting and all like that. And when you look at your privilege account security solutions, those mid and large organizations again is going to get very little return on investment when they try to manually manage these privileged identities. So these organizations, what they're doing is they find it more efficient and ultimately more productive for them to use some type of automated process when they're trying to manage their own privileged account security solutions. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about in the recommendation there. So let's take a look. I just want to throw this cartoon up. What is life for no privilege and what is life for privilege? You got to have that intermediary, that go-between. You got to prove to me who you are before I give you access. But let's look at the tools and things like that that's out there that we can use to do this job. Okay, the technologies and the strategies that's available to help us get better control over those privileged accounts that we have. And there are privileged account management products and tools out there that's going to help me mitigate most of the risks associated with those elevated access that we know everybody has to have. Also, it's going to help you with compliance. Once again, I have SAS 70 reviews out there and other compliance reviews. It's going to make it easy, just like a SIM system that you have out there, a security event management system. It's going to incident event management system. It's going to give you the tools and the information you need to better do your job. Let's look at some of the ways we can do that, some of the concepts that we have out here. Now, PAM, we've been using PAM here on this webinar, but PAM and all the other acronyms that's out there related to PAM is about one thing, and that's really about the software systems that we have to use to manage and secure our sensitive digital data. And those terms are about three things. It's about safeguarding data by protecting who has access to your system, how they can get to the server in the first place, and what they're allowed to do once they're on your sensitive information systems. When we look at our privileged accounts, those products out there usually control access to accounts usually in two different ways, and I have them up on the screen for you to see. But usually the first mechanism that we have forces the administrator or some type of program to check out the account password and to make sure that person is authorized to be on that account. The second mechanism changes the account's password frequently on the target platform. One of the things I recommend is maybe even daily, weekly, or whatever, changing those passwords out so those passwords won't be reused. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But these products also provide some workflow capabilities for approval and follow-up after giving emergency access to a privileged account using break glass or something like that. Again, accountability and tracking, some of the things we need. Also, you can have things like checkout methods. I'll talk about each one of these briefly. Password frequency. I'll talk about it now. When I talk about checkout methods, we look at traditional identity management provisioning systems. They're usually not up to the task of managing our privileged accounts because they lack checkout methods. Okay, but these privileged account management tools provide two password checkout methods, maybe more, that we can use. Usually they have an interactive one and a programmatic one. And in that interactive checkout method, the system administrator used that privileged account to access the target platforms. And usually that system administrator authenticates to that privileged account management product through some type of web browser session or something like that. And once they authenticate, that system administrator retrieves that specific information, or I'm sorry, not information, but an account password. And then they use that password to interact with the Windows terminal services or secure shell or telnet, whatever it is they're using. Password change frequency is another thing we control. I told you that's important. So when I control access by routinely changing those account passwords on that target platform I'm working with, those are privileged account management products provide us with options for how we can control the password change frequency, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever we want it to be. It can also allow us to have privilege sign-on or privilege single sign-on, so that the system admin can access the target platform using some type of privileged account management product, workstation, or client software. And then what's happening is that behind the scenes, that privileged account management software is going to retrieve the password, it's going to log the user onto the system, doing some type of session protocol, and then track what's happening on there so we know what's going on. And the last one is programmatic password caching. Now, what happens is this: when you use a highly distributed production environment, like a large retail store or something like that, or a corporation, they're going to be at a disadvantage if the account management password cannot be retrieved if they have some type of network issue. If you're a store, Amazon, whatever, you don't want to go down. You need to be up 100% of the time. But here's what's happened. Some of the privileged account management vendors out there have responded by providing the ability for them to cache the account password on the target platform. Now, we know that caching passwords introduced its own security risks that we have to be concerned about, like retrieving the privileged account dynamically and things like that. However, I'll say this: caching is a much better alternative than leaving the password embedded in files, where somebody can download the file and find it. So the account password is going to be more difficult to steal if you do it this way, because it's not going to be in the resident or not be resident in the file. And the password is going to be changed frequently anyway if you follow the above step. So it's going to be good for us to do it that way. The cache won't be any good anymore after a while. Now, what goes on with PAM when we want to use this? So again, I told you PAM has a variety of names. We call it PIM, we call it, which is Privileged Identity Manager. We call it Privileged Identity and Access Management, and things like that. But whatever name you use, there's several things that's going to happen, or several ways it can be used. You can use it as a credential vault or safe. And in that approach, you're going to eliminate the sharing of privileged passwords because you're going to store them in this vault, and you're going to control how they're issued, how they're returned, how they're modified. The second one is Windows delegation. So this approach is going to temporarily elevate your user permissions to those of a Windows administrator on your workstation. But you're going to have this elevated privilege for a little while, and that's typically going to be a PAM issue. But the risk, as it says here, regular users exploit that temporary elevated status to cause a breach is low compared to that of granting them widespread network and system access. It's more controlled this way. You can be an Active Directory administrator, and that's similar to me delegating in Unix and Linux when you have the root account, if you're familiar with the root account. This is going to delegate the Active Duty Administrator account on the Windows server. And the last one is session monitoring. So here I'm going to be able to monitor your activities that you're performing while you're in that elevated access status that I just gave you. All right. So now we come to the meat. What's the 10 best practices that I want to recommend for managing Windows privileged accounts in 2018? And the first one is using automated, I'm sorry guys, I get so excited, I get loud, I'm sorry. The first one is use automated tools to disable inactive privileged accounts. So back to excitement. So these privileged account security controls, what they do is they provide the account security across our enterprise, and it's difficult for us to do it because there's a lot of human error involved with this. So we rely on manual solutions and institutional knowledge to do this. Basically, it's better than doing nothing, but automation is going to be far more effective. So number one, I say use automated tools to disable those inactive accounts. Number two, I have up there, use multiple authentication. Multi-factor authentication. I can't read my own stuff. Use multi-factor authentication for all your administrative access, including your domain administrative access. So here, while this is not foolproof, this additional layer of security is going to make privileged identities a harder target for those advanced threats, especially those folks who have more advanced skills. So a lot of platforms like your legacy network devices or your business applications you might have might not support multi-factor authentication. So deploying that privileged account security solution with support for multi-factor authentication is going to eliminate the need for you or for you to support multi-factor authentication with your native stuff that's out there on those target devices. It's going to be centralized once again. Number three, implement automated password verification and reconciliation to ensure that the passwords of record are current on all systems. So what we have here again is automation is critical, folks, especially when you're managing your privileged identities. So those new accounts are going to be constantly created, and they're going to be constantly deleted, and you're going to be doing that probably on a daily basis. So requiring an automated system to manage and verify those passwords is going to be a central process for you once again. So that's my next recommendation. My fourth recommendation, regularly again change and verify those hard-coded passwords that we have embedded in our applications. I'd rather you not have hard-coded passwords there at all. But auditing of all those accounts and implementing automated management of those application credentials is going to be able to give you a chance to achieve regular password rotation, which is important, without introducing risk into your enterprise. So until those applications accounts are managed and organizations, your organization, my organization, we're not going to be able to truly manage the risk associated with all the privileged accounts in our infrastructure without doing this. Okay. Number 5, next is deploy a solution that provides the ability to directly connect to a target system without displaying the password to the user. So what I mean here is that when I'm trying to prevent the disclosure of privileged passwords to end users, that's going to add an additional layer of security that I need. And it's also going to reduce the maintenance overhead of shared accounts. But what it's going to do is it's going to improve the end user experience. Even though we put more security in place, what's our mantra that we always talk about? I always say security should be seamless. The end user shouldn't even realize that something else is happening in the background. So we want to do something like this to ensure that user experience is good. If you don't have a good user experience, what often happens? They don't use it. Okay. Only a couple more. Number 6, implement a gateway to eliminate privileged users directly accessing sensitive assets in the IT infrastructure. So here, that gateway between the end user and your sensitive assets is going to provide a check and balance that you're going to need to prevent malicious insiders from exploiting those privileged accounts that we have. And it's also going to lay out a clear auditability of those users' access at the same time. Again, accountability. Number 8, I want you to implement session recording for all privileged access. I want you to require all your privileged account actions to be recorded and have session recording and video playback if needed, just in case we have to go do a forensic investigation and change change management review or something like that. Hey, I spent 18 years as a federal agent. This kind of stuff make our job easy. We can go back and easily pull this stuff up, take a look, and figure out what happened. Next is I want you to proactively detect malicious behavior. Again, as an 18-year law enforcement person, most of the work I did was being reactive. And in this world, we want to stop being reactive and we want to start being proactive. I talk about user behavior analytics. I talk about all these things that allow you to figure out what the person is doing in the first place. So now we can proactively detect malicious behavior. So a solution that we can get to monitor, detect, and alert us on anomalous privileged user behavior is going to be critical for us as a best-in-class privileged account security strategy that we can implement. So I highly recommend this one. And the last one I have is implement a focused auditing on the use of administrative privilege functions and monitor again for anomalous behavior. So logging all that user activity and generating alerts on unusual behavior is going to provide us again that additional information on our privileged account use, access and use of those accounts. So if we integrate that with the security teams, that can help them to dramatically reduce the speed of the reviews they're doing and the speed of investigations and look at potential incidents and violations and actually see and know what's happening in the first place. All right, so those are my 10 best practices for managing your window accounts, and hopefully you'll consider those helpful and start to implement some of those in your organization. Some important considerations to have is what type of security information management system do you want to converge this with? Your identity management, how you incorporate that into the system. Privilege delegations is very important, and even the physical security, of course, of our assets come into play when we talk about privileged access management as well. So here's what you look for. As the number of cyber attacks increase, the need for organizations to increase their security posture is important too. We're looking for at least authentication services with our PAM solution and a privileged manager for Windows accounts that's going to allow us to do the things that we're trying to do. And with that said, I want to welcome you to my partner, and he's going to tell you about Power Broker for Windows and how it can do some of the things that we were talking about. Jason, take it away.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep up that passion you clearly have. Based on that presentation we just saw, there were several things that I could have talked about today. I could do a whole working session to show all the things that Beyond Trust does to address the various aspects of PAM and security. Today I'm just going to focus on what's called Power Broker for Windows. A couple of slides, and then I'll show a little bit of a demo, give you an idea of what this thing does. Power Broker for Windows specifically focuses on the least privilege aspect on the Windows devices, whether they be desktop servers, laptops, VDI, doesn't really matter as long as it's Windows. And the whole premise is don't log in as an admin, right? And Derek pointed this out. Admin rights are kind of the crux of a lot of the things. In fact, privilege is really the root cause of the data breaches that you see, regardless of what it might have ended up as. Somebody somewhere had too much privilege, whether they did it themselves or an outside attacker came in and utilized that privilege and moved around. When you eliminate those admin rights from a client-side system or even a server, the ability to infiltrate that machine decreases greatly. I think it's around 80% of the critical vulnerabilities that we normally worry about go away as a worry. If you just remove admin rights, it's that simple. The idea around lateral movement goes away as well. If I can't infiltrate one box, I can't then set up a foothold to see what else I can do on another. Because ideally what's going to happen here, and this slide right here sort of just shows it. I'm going to show it in a bigger screen here for you all. Go down a few. Yeah, that's us. We're Beyond Trust. So this screen here actually shows it pretty well. It's kind of like a chess match, right? So again, somebody tries to get in, some kind of exploitation, whether it be done through an application vulnerability, downloads, phishing attacks, you name it. We've seen them all. If there's too many privileges on that local box, then what they do is try to hijack those privileges and escalate themselves. What else can they actually do? And that leads us into number 3 there, that lateral movement. So somebody in HR or sales or most of the roles within your company should never be polling the machine to see what users on that machine and certainly what users on other machines have admin rights. This is a prelude to some kind of lateral movement, and we can detect that kind of stuff. We can stop that kind of behavior as well. Even if somebody does have those admin rights, we can still do app control and prevent a lot of that as well. So from our point of view, like I said, there's a lot of things we could talk about today. We kind of focus on a platform. There's a reporting console that we offer up with all of the products that we sell, called the Beyond Insight IT Risk Management Platform. But essentially, it does the reporting, the auditing, the management, even of the policy for the Power Broker for Windows, the least privilege tool for Windows. We have a Power Broker for Mac. We have Power Broker Unix, Linux. We offer AD bridging to get those non-Windows machines into your domain, so you don't have to worry about Jay Silva logging into 10 different Linux boxes with 10 different usernames. You want to be able to report back and say, what did Jason do wherever he may have been, whether it was Windows or Linux or a network device. So we offer that as well. Again, today I'm really going to focus on that Windows least privilege model. The idea of logging in as a standard user, but still remaining productive as well. Just skip that part actually. I'm a bigger fan of show and tell rather than slides. Okay, so on this box here, it's just a Windows 10 box, and I'm logged in as a standard user. Nothing real special there. Nothing out of the ordinary. The issue comes in when I try to run something. So if I come over here and I try to run data sources, it opens up just fine. But if I try to do something like a system data source configuration, I can't do that. This right here is really what stops people from going to a least privilege model. It's a very cultural thing to say, we're going to remove your admin rights. All of a sudden, everybody's an IT guru. They had no idea really what admin rights were, but all they know is because you're going to take them away, I need them. They really don't. I mean, devs, IT, most people in the organization really can get by without those admin rights and those edge case reasonings. Some folks may keep them, but what you use is a product like Power Broker for Windows to just elevate those privileges, whether the activities that they're performing are local or whether they are remote. It doesn't matter. We can address them both. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually put some policy in place when I show this as well. Sometimes it actually shows up as a UAC prompt. So I'm going to put some policy in place that says, look, if that happens, let it happen, right? I know that this user is a standard user, but that application is a quote unquote approved business application. This person needs to run it, or everyone in this group or everyone in the company needs to run it. You can also filter down using item level targeting. We actually created item level targeting. Microsoft purchased that from us at the same time they bought what is now Group Policy Preferences and AGPM from us as well. But you can use item level targeting to say, Yeah, sure, this rule exists, but it only exists for certain people. In my case, given the time here, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on basically for everybody. No real filtering on that. And if you look at it, it's pretty simple. There's a trigger point. The power broker for Windows client that's on this system is listening for something to happen. In this case, if I run anything out of this internal suite folder, I could do a publisher or pass-through, it doesn't matter. But I did it a little bit simpler here. So if I run anything out of that folder, then I want some action to take place. In this case, in most of my cases, when I'm elevating something, I'm going to give the application the rights it needs. I'm not giving the user any additional rights. I'm giving the application the rights. That app, that process, that installer, it will run as if it is in the administrative security group, whereas the standard user still remains that, just a standard user. So this rule now is turned on. It was there, but it was actually shut off. The mode I'm in, I'm going to go ahead and update my policy, tell the system that it's okay. This policy should be live, and I'm going to bring those down, right? There's a couple of different modes here while this is running. I'm using what's called central policy mode. So I ask for my policy and receive it over 443. There's a mode for group policy. There's a mode for EPO. So you can use them all. You can use one of them. Doesn't really matter. But whatever your scenario might be, we can help you address what's best for your environment. So this guy finish up a little bit. All right, so he's done. Again, all I did there was turn on a rule. And before, when I tried to run Process Monitor, I couldn't. And now when I run Process Monitor, it works fine. Again, Process Monitor is running as the user that's logged in. That standard user can now run this application, even though the app needs elevation. That's all I've done. I've given that app the rights it needs. And if I didn't want to be so generic with just saying, look, give the application the same rights that the administrative security group has, you have that option as well, right? I mean, you can do anything you really need to with the product. I'm just trying to kind of give an idea of what the stuff is. Again, earlier I ran that data source application, and I wasn't able to perform a system data source configuration. So we have a couple of ways to help you with that too. This tool here, I have it up and running. This is sort of a quick win kind of tool. So, when you, from a local machine or a couple of remote machines, if you want to pull back some of the data that this Power Broker for Windows client is generating and then use that, you certainly can. The other option is actually to use Beyond Insight itself, right? If you have a larger group of machines or users that you want to take a look at, you can certainly do so as well and centralize all that data up into the one platform here. And if I wanted a rule for one of these things, if I didn't already have a rule for Process Monitor, for instance, I would tell this system to go ahead and make me that rule and put it right into my policy that way. But yeah, I'm just going to play around with this guy a little bit. So I ran the ODBC tool a little bit ago, and if I wanted to pretend, what if a rule existed, right? I can just say, you know what, launch it again. It's going to launch it with a publisher rule. It's going to give it admin rights. Do I want if this thing had any children in it, want I turn it on or not? But I can sort of test the waters a little bit and let it put it in not a sandbox, but a what if situation. So when I go here and I run system DSN, works just fine. Again, the user wasn't changed, but the app has been elevated. And now that I know that if the rule had existed already and it would have worked just fine, I'll just copy it and I'll put it right into my policy. Paste. So now I have a rule that whenever ODBC runs, based on its publisher information, or its path, or its hash, whatever I want to do, I tend to use publish rules a lot. Now the next time it runs, I don't need to do anything special. It will just work. So a lot of the things you'll know, I mean, you know what kind of software that your users are running, maybe not all of it, but some of the stuff you can go ahead and just make rules proactively. Other stuff you might want the logging to assist you with. Which is fine, which is why we offer the utilities we do, whether the full boat centralized reporting, which again comes with the software, or the more localized utility here that I was using there. If anyone is familiar with Power Broker for Windows and don't know what that utility is, it just released today in 7.5, which is being posted as we speak. So that's why you wouldn't have seen that before, but it now exists. So have fun using that one as well. Now, those are just simplistic rules, right? So the other thing that happens is sometimes the elevation that I require isn't local, it's on a remote machine. If I'm running something like GPMC, for instance, I might launch that exe from my local workstation, but I need permissions on another host. Well, a standard PBW Power Broker for Windows rule can't elevate a remote token, which is okay. I don't want to be getting into that security hole. But what I can do is run it as somebody else. I mentioned earlier that I could have just spent the same amount of time I'm talking about Power Broker for Windows and talked about our password safe, which is our enterprise password management. Rotates passwords, broker sessions to RDP or SSH, the things you'd expect a password management tool to do. But the beauty here is I can tell Power Broker for Windows to go retrieve the credentials of a managed account and run the application as that account without telling me as the human being what the password actually was. So I have a few of these rules actually in place. So let's see here. So yeah, I have a couple of them here. Well, a few of them here. I just added in the MMC stuff. But if I take a look and I run GPMC, it might actually be too fast to see it on the screen. But let me see here. So boom, right there. It says retrieving credentials from PowerBroker Password Safe. GPMC is now running as somebody else. It's running, in my case, it's running as my ADM account. I'm logged in as a user that has an associated ADM account. I, as a real person, don't need to know what the password is for that ADM account. I just need PowerBroker for Windows to use it. And I do it that way, and I actually map these accounts to each other, my account to my ADM and your account to your ADM. I do it that way to make sure that nobody else would be able to run Group Policy Management Console as my ADM account. The auditing trail is intact, right? So I ran it as somebody else. I never saw what the password was. I don't need it. What I really need is the access, and that's what people think they need. They think they need to know everything about the administrative credentials. They need to be an admin because they're very important in the company. And granted, yeah, everyone's really important in the company, but what they really need is the ability to run the applications. If they need to do something that's sort of off base with the normal day-to-day routine, that's okay. There's plenty of ways to do that as well with the software. There's a shell rule, for instance, that you could actually allow your users to right-click on something and say run it elevated. There's no rule for it, but I'll give you an option to say, yeah, I trust you for now, and you can go ahead and run these things elevated. I'll see a report of it. I'll get the events. If it is, in fact, something that's going to be done on a more regular basis, I can easily make a rule for it. So the next time you come across it, you don't need to right-click. If I wanted to sort of put a message in front of that, and Derek was talking about this as well, I can absolutely prove that the person at the keyboard is who I think it should be. I can't just let anyone run something elevated from any box wherever they feel like it. So I might ask them to revalidate their AD credentials just to make sure it's who I think it is. I may ask them for a multi-factor as well. I might do one of these. I might do all of these. It's all up to really the importance of the sensitivity, let's say, of the application they just try to do this with. But I hope that gives you a good picture, basically, of what least privilege looks like. It absolutely can be done. I know there's a lot of concern around it. We talked to a lot of companies that in the past have tried to remove admin rights, and it didn't go well, and that makes sense. Without a utility like PowerBroker for Windows, it's very, very difficult. I won't say impossible, but it's very difficult to achieve least privilege without something to assist that with. So PBW here just says, look, here's the things that I've already approved, and as new things come up, it's pretty simple to make them. It's not a tool where after a few weeks you need to be in here full time. It's really just a tool that you sort of take a look at what kind of user behavior is happening now. You don't have to take away admin rights day one. You can again just monitor what's going on based on that user behavior. The software will tell you what kind of rules you're going to need. You say yes or no to those, and then go from there. All right, so it actually absolutely can be done. So again, I do want to leave a little time for questions. I'm sure there's going to be some questions for Derek, given the breadth of the presentation that he just gave. I know I would have a few myself. It's good stuff there. So Sarah, I believe you want to run just a quick little poll here as well. If you want to go ahead and do that, I'll stop my sharing.
Cool, great. So, hey guys, at this point, if you would like to schedule a more personalized one-on-one demo or a deeper conversation with somebody at Beyond Trust to walk you through the product in a more thorough way, Jason did a great job of demoing, but there's so much more to be able to show you guys. If you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask a Beyond Trust expert, please select yes. and somebody will be in contact with you to schedule that. I'm going to leave this poll up, and let's dive into a couple of questions. I'm launching the question bar right now. Derek, this came in for you. So what is the difference between service accounts and application accounts? And Derek, make sure you're off of mute, please.
I'm sorry. Thanks for saying that. So in my mind, and I'll let Jason answer this too, but with the application accounts, again, there's certain passwords and accounts that just run applications. With the service account, that's where your sysadmin or some other service provider, it might even be security, they might have a service account. They can actually go in and control certain things that they have privileges for. So when you look at those are going to be the two different kind of accounts. Of course, you have your user accounts, but those are going to be the primary differences that I can tell you about there. Jason, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it pretty well, and in a lot of ways, of the same thing. But when you say service account, oftentimes the immediate thought bubble is these are accounts used as to log on as in a Windows service, right? So that's kind of what you think about. But they're also used for like a shared account. So you have 10, 20, 50 help desk users, and they might all use the same administrative credentials to perform tasks. They're gonna do some service with that account. But that means that all of those people now have those credentials. And again, as soon as you share a password, as soon as you put it on a post-it, it really, really leaves you exposed to privilege attacks and lateral movement. So,
And people can find them doing audits. That's what I do. I turned over
yeah,
keyboards
good
and
luck
things
on
like
an
that.
audit.
Yes.
Yeah.
This might have come in for Jason, and Victor, you might need to clarify your questions, but do we need Microsoft Identity Manager Server or any component? I don't know if that's related to if they need
Probably
that
for
with
me.
PowerBroker for Windows. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually may be a little bit for both of us, and Derek can answer, maybe what that'll do for you. Microsoft Identity Management is IAM. PAM is a subset, right? So, Identity Access Management is what can somebody do. PAM is usually what did they do, and when you look at those two pieces of data together, that's where you get your visibility, and that's where you prove out to auditors. Here's what they're allowed to do. Here's what they did do. Now, take your data and go away. But no, for PowerBroker for Windows, you absolutely don't need anything else, any other kind of identity access management. I recommend using something, but there's no requirements for that to use PowerBroker for Windows.
And just to the side, once again, PAM gives you an additional tool in your toolbox. So yes, you can use IAMs, you can use user behavior analytic tools and all that, and it gives you that additional. But again, you don't need it. There's some, like I said, there's some native capabilities within Windows for doing some type of PAM, but then you're gonna have to do it on all the different servers and things that you use, and that's gonna make your job a little bit more difficult.
Okay, Derek, this came in for you. So how often should passwords on privileged accounts be changed?
So I kind of touched on that during my talk, and I said daily, weekly, monthly, things like that. Now, a good rule of thumb for me is because you have hundreds of them, you have thousands of them, is to change it daily. So if you do it on a daily basis, if your system admin person quit today, he will only have access to a few of those accounts on your systems because they're going to automatically expire in 24 hours. If you take longer times to change it, that week or that month, it's going to introduce some possibilities for people to access it because it's being retained for a longer time. So I would recommend daily, but it depends on your environment and what your goals are for your information system.
Yeah,
Jason, you
and
have any?
Derek.
Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
if I can add to that, if you're using a tool now, maybe you are, and for us it's Password Safe, the thing that actually manages and rotates passwords. Keep in mind that for the most part, nobody ever sees these passwords, so go ahead and rotate those things every day. It's not a worry anymore. Like you just gave me a 28 or 100 character password, and now it changes every day. They didn't see it in the first place, so you're let the system rotate those passwords daily. If somebody ever did get a hold of it, it would be much harder for them to do it every day, especially not being detected.
Yep, that's it.
So some of the functionalities of PowerBroker for Windows is now embedded in Windows 2016 Active Directory. Any comments? What is the difference?
Yeah, there's actually nothing that says least privilege. There's nothing in Microsoft that says if this thing runs, elevate it in place, right? They have bastion forests and they have all this kind of stuff, but there is still nothing in Microsoft that actually addresses least privilege to the way we do it. A lot of good stuff, and I'm not saying don't use it. Right, I love the Microsoft stuff that's in there. You know, it just hasn't really been time tested with the new stuff they have. But really, there's nothing that does least privilege to its true basis.
Jason, Power Broker for, and I don't know what this acronym is, RHEL7.
Oh, that's Unix Linux. That's just a flavor of Unix.
Okay, PowerBroker for RHEL7 will control limit user access to run sudo or pbrun commands, or can it automatically elevate a user like the rules in Windows for applications?
Sort of. So one of the things you can do with PowerBroker Unix Linux is give somebody an actual shell. And within that shell, you can control still what can and can't be done. So you don't need to run pbrun every time because you're already in the pbul shell. I hope that answers that question, by the way.
Cool. Well, if it didn't, please respond, Jamie. Okay, let's see. Jumping back in, had a bunch of stuff. Thanks everybody for sending in these questions. So, okay, so Jason, does PAM solution such as Beyond Trust provide capability to detect insider threat activity, or is it handled by the SIEM, the SIM?
Both, right? So I always highly recommend sending the data that PowerBroker for Windows generates eventually up to a SIM, like a Splunk type of thing, because you get more data centralized than just what comes from Beyond Trust. But we can absolutely help there as well. There's a set of rules we recently added in, and there's a report that I put along with it around lateral movement. So, you know, I put together several things that say these are things that people really shouldn't be running. So if they are, I want to be aware of them. And I just put them in the rule library under the suspicious activity lateral movement rules. But yeah, both. But by all means, please, if you have a SIM in place, go ahead and use that. Just our data goes right up to it, right from Beyond Insight, right to Splunk or whatever, ArcSight, whatever you might have.
Gabriella is asking for you guys to repeat the difference between IAM and PAM again.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give my little spin on it, and I'm sure Derek will have his as well. So when you talk about IAM, it's more about what can somebody do. Like I said, Jason Silva has access to this, that, and this. PAM is around what did Jason do? Did Jason utilize the rules I've put in? Did Jason actually run the application in an elevated state? You can also do session monitoring, PowerBroker for Windows, so if you needed to. That's really the difference. What can I do and what did I do?
And I think I want to add one thing. When you're looking at PAM, remember you're mainly looking at your privilege accounts as well and what's happening with those. Identity and access management can be used with user accounts as well. Again, it's about identifying who those users are and then give them access to certain accounts that you want to control within that. But they don't necessarily have to be privileged accounts. That's just what I wanted to add.
All right.
And with everything else, if that helped, or if you want to talk about that in more depth, either myself, we have folks that specialize in that area as well. So if you need a deeper conversation, just let us know.
Yeah, let us know. You'll be receiving a survey at the end of this session asking you if there's anything you'd like to discuss further, and so you can select that. And then we'll be sure to contact you. So we are at the top of the hour now, you guys, so I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. We did just about 10 minutes of questions too, so that's great. I did receive a couple of questions asking about the recording and the slides, and yes, you will be receiving a follow-up email, and it will come from our email alias communications@beyondtrust.com, and that will be in your inbox within 1 to 2 business days from now, and it will contain a link to the recording and a link to the slides shown here today. So make sure that email is whitelisted so you receive the follow-up without any interruption. And also, if you are reporting your CPE credits to ISACA, please download the attendance verification document now. You can find it in the handout section, actually along with the PowerPoint slides. And remember that this document is proof from Beyond Trust that you attended this session. You just have to fill out the blanks with your name and your account number. And then as attendees, you're responsible for reporting your CPE hours earned directly to ISACA. So make sure you download that now. It will not be available later. And with that, a huge thanks to our experts, Derek and Jason. You guys, thank you so much. You rocked it. An hour filled with awesome information, great takeaways, and I think the audience can really appreciate, the concise presentation and moving through all that content. So thank you guys so much for that. And to everybody who attended live today, we really appreciate you, and thanks for submitting all your questions. We will see you at our next webinar. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.